from the earliest memory that I have many, but the earliest memory I have of my father is him having the Bible out on the table and me up on my knees as a little boy with my elbows and listening to my father teach me the Bible. I also remember my mother said that my memory is quite remarkable in the fact that I remember my dad coming to talk to me when I was a wee little boy. I won't tell you how old because you won't believe me that I was, not him. But I was an only child, and both of my grandfathers passed away when my parents were wee little children. My dad was 8, and my mother was 9. And my grandfather on the Jones side of my family was having heart trouble. He was sick. He had a stroke. And then he was a sharecropper, so we went out to go check on his fields. And when he was stepping over a fence, he just stepped over the fence and had a heart attack at 53. My father's father, his name is Albert Bowman, and he built houses. He built a lot of houses in Houston, and then they were from Louisiana, but he went to Houston, worked in them. That's where my father was born. But my dad said that the last memory he had of his father is that his dad had a heart attack and was laying in the bed right by a window. And my dad was only 8 years old or so and walked up to the window and asked him, "Daddy, are you okay?" And my grandfather told him, "Son, I'll be okay. You just go run along and play." But in the lives of my forefathers, there was a very influential man named Dr. James Crumpton. And Brother Crumpton had led everyone to the Lord in my family with the exception of my dad's mother. My dad's mother was saved when she was 14 years old in southern Mississippi because she had a very godly father, which was my great-grandfather. Beyond that, we look in Pleasant Hill, Mississippi, at Pleasant Hill Baptist Church, actually in Bogachita, Mississippi. We can go back and look at all of my forefathers who were very involved in that church. And they always had their families in the house of God. One of my forefathers was Dr. Bowman, and he actually died because he had gotten hit by a vehicle, an automobile accident. But he was really involved in his local church. All the heritage that you see, that when my forefathers came from the Isle of Jura in Scotland, they came here my grandfather came here in 1738. His two first boys here were preachers. As I look back at my heritage, I look and reflect on the memories of my father, and the first memory is of that open Bible. And then constantly fishing. We fished all the time. I told him the other day, I said, I don't know if we were poor or what the deal was. He said, no, that wasn't really the case. He's just addicted to fishing, right? So we'd be up in the swamps 5-6 days a week. And some of it I loved and some of it I hated. My mama always brings it to the point they put a hat on my head one day. I wear a hat all the time now, but I couldn't take it. I was in a little weird aluminum boat, was in a little bar pit, if you would say, and it was too hot. And I told my mom, if y'all don't take me back, I'm little. I said, I'm going to throw my hat in the water. I was roasting. But with my parents losing both of their parents at a very young age, I would say that my parents' emphasis on the importance of time is one of the most profound things that they taught me. My dad would pick me up in the mornings and drive me to school every day. I cherished those times. So he would pick me up and talk to me all the way to school. And brother, I'm telling you right now, I hated getting out of that little 1960-something Volkswagen. My mother calls that Hitler's revenge. But I hated getting out of that Volkswagen and have to walk in that cold, clammy classroom because I really enjoyed the fellowship of my father. But my father taught me foremost about Christ. That the importance of Christ in my life was the utmost of all importance of everything. I know that we all have different backgrounds and we all have different upbringings and all these things. But as a young person, if your family provided for you a very lovely youth, you need to tell them while they're alive. And you say, well, they didn't provide that for me, then tell them you love them. Because when you look at the relationship that you have, your love for them may be something that could bring them to Christ. I look back at my father, and the encouragement is this, and I believe this is why God told me to change this morning. There may be some young man or some middle-aged father here that you think, well, I have all the time in the world. No, you don't. Time is of the essence in teaching your children about Jesus Christ. But the other thing is the teaching of manhood. Do you know that David said to Solomon, show thyself a man? And it wasn't in how much athletic ability he had. It was on his wisdom and his walk with God that David told Solomon, show thyself a man. Here in verse 2, the Bible said, the Lord is my strength. And that's something that my father taught me, is that I'm not going to get any strength in of myself. I cannot sustain myself emotionally. I need God. The world will tell you to love yourself. You'll be a better man for it. No, you already love yourself. What you need to do is love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and then love your neighbor as yourself. You know, if you and I loved our neighbors as ourselves, we wouldn't treat each other the way we do, now would we? If we lived in the house together, or the closest neighbor I have is the people that I live with, and if I was right in my relationship with them, how many things would change? But really it comes down to God using my father and my mother, but my father to teach me about the future. I believe that, and I've said this 1,000 times in the past 19 years, and so forgive me for repeating it. I really believe that my father knew that God was going to put me in a ministry. My father is an amazing, accomplished musician. But I've been away from my father for 35 years, and my mother. For 35 years, I've been away from them. And thank God for cell phones, and thank God for FaceTime, right? So that communication is absolutely key. Let me say this. There's several profound things that my father taught me, and this may be an encouragement to you. He said all the time, where there is no communication, there's no home. All you have is cohabitation. My father would not put up with any arguing, no bickering, no yelling, nothing like that. You say, what would he do? I didn't find out. We just didn't do it. Because I had enough love and respect for my father that I wasn't going to do that. But I'm going to tell you something, and you can get mad at me if you want to, but just put the socks on, they're comfortable. Listen, when church was going on, my father had me in church. My father didn't take vacations from church. We didn't go somewhere we didn't go to. No, he had me in church. We didn't have family reunions. That had to deal a lot with my grandmothers. We didn't have family reunions on Sundays to where everybody's over at the house on Sundays, so we're just going to skip church and eat dinner. That didn't happen. Why? Because the focus wasn't us. The focus was Christ. That my grandmothers made sure that family reunions were on Saturdays. That's a good thing. That way, and when you got up in the morning, everybody went to church. Listen. The issue of your time is of the essence. It's one thing about the past, but the future, and you're building for the future. I guarantee you that my grandfather that came here in 1738 never thought that in 2022 his grandson would be talking about how important his life is to me. That thought never went through his mind. Do you think it did? I don't think so. Truly a frontiersman to come here And I was never a thought across his mind. But listen, the instruction that he gave his sons has led to me. All that has filtered down to me. Brother, we might not be the greatest fathers in the world, but if we've sinned, we can get it right and just ask for forgiveness. Where there is no communication, you do not have a home, you have cohabitation. You must communicate. But the way you're going to have to communicate was Christ as your focus. I can honorably say that I can repeat the same thing that he repeated in verse 2. The Lord is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. He is my God, and I will prepare him an habitation, my Father's God. When your children, it all comes down to death, doesn't it? When your children lay you in the grave, what would they tell a preacher to say at your funeral? My Father's God was. Because, friend, do not think that the influence that you have right now is not going to impact those in the future. You know what, Brother Willie? I'm able to look back all those decades and know that not all of them were saved, but the majority of my forefathers were born-again people. And they loved God, and they loved the Word of God. And though I look back and reflect upon them, they would have never known to even think about me. But I say that to say this. Do not squander your time with your children. And do not de-emphasize the power of God's Word in their life because it matters. And do not ever underestimate what influence that you can have on future generations for the sole fact of being godly. Godliness. You can live a righteous, holy life if you're saved through the power of God, but you're going to have to make your life up, make your mind up. I'm going to live for the Lord no matter what it takes. And teach my children to love God. Every head bowed, every eye closed.